File number 17 of Farthest North, Volume 1. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Sharon Riskadal. Farthest North by Fridtjof Nansen, Volume 1. Chapter 8, Second Autumn in the Ice, Part 1. So summer was over, and our second autumn and winter were beginning. But we were now more inured to the trials of patience attendant on this life, and time passed quickly. Besides, I myself was now taken up with new plans and preparations. Allusion has several times been made to the fact that we had, during the course of the summer, got everything into readiness for the possibility of having to make our way home across the ice. 6 double kayaks had been built, the hand sledges were in good order, and careful calculation had been made of the amount of food, clothing, fuel, etc., that it would be necessary to carry. But I had also quietly begun to make preparations for my own meditated expedition north. In August, as already mentioned, I had begun to work at a single kayak, the framework made of bamboo. I had said nothing about my plan yet, except a few words to Sverdrup. It was impossible to tell how far north the drift would take us, and so many things might happen before spring. In the meantime life on board went on as usual. There were the regular observations and all sorts of occupations, and I myself was not so absorbed in my plans that I did not find time for other things too. Thus I see from my diary that in the end of August and in September I must have been very proud of a new invention that I made for the galley. All last year we had cooked on a particular kind of copper range heated by petroleum lamps. It was quite satisfactory, except that it burned several quarts of petroleum a day. I could not help fearing sometimes that our lighting supply might run short if the expedition lasted longer than was expected, and always wondered if it would not be possible to construct an apparatus that would burn coal oil, black oil, as we call it on board, of which we had 20 tons, originally intended for the engine. And I succeeded in making such an apparatus. On August 30th I write, "Have tried my newly invented coal oil apparatus for heating the range, and it is beyond expectation successful. It is splendid that we shall be able to burn coal oil in the galley. Now there is no fear of our having to cry ourselves blind for lack of light by and by. This adds more than 4,000 gallons to our stock of oil, and we can keep all our fine petroleum now for lighting purposes, and have lamps for many a year, even if we are a little extravagant. The 20 tons of coal oil ought to keep the range going for 4 years, I think." The contrivance is as simple as possible. From a reservoir of oil a pipe leads down and into the fireplace. The oil drips down from the end of this pipe into an iron bowl, and is here sucked up by a sheet of asbestos or by coal ashes. The flow of oil from the pipe is regulated by a fine valve cock. To ensure a good draught, I bring a ventilating pipe from outside right by the range door. Air is pressed through this by a large windsail on deck and blows straight on to the iron bowl, where the oil burns briskly with a clear white flame. Whoever lights the fire in the morning has only to go on deck and see that the windsail is set to the wind, to open the ventilator, to turn the cock so that the oil runs properly, and then set it burning with a scrap of paper. It looks after itself, and the water is boiling in 20 minutes or half an hour. One could not have anything much easier than this, it seems to me. But of course in our, as in other communities, it is difficult to introduce reforms. Everything new is looked upon with suspicion. Somewhat later I write of the same apparatus. We are now using the galley again with the coal oil fire. The moving down took place the day before yesterday, and the fire was used yesterday. It works capitally. A 3-foot wind is enough to give a splendid draught. The day before yesterday, when I was sitting with some of the others in the saloon in the afternoon, I heard a dull report out in the galley, and said at once that it sounded like an explosion. Presently Pettersen stuck a head in at the door as black as a sweep's, great lumps of soot all over it, and said that the stove had exploded right into his face. He was only going to look if it was burning rightly, and the whole fiendish thing flew out at him. A stream of words, not unmingled with oaths, flowed like peas out of a sack, while the rest of us yelled with laughter. In the galley it was easy to see that something had happened. The walls were covered with soot in lumps and stripes pointing toward the fireplace. The explanation of the accident was simple enough. The draught had been insufficient, and a quantity of gas had formed which had not been able to burn until air was let in by Pettersen opening the door. This is a good beginning. I told Pettersen in the evening that I would do the cooking myself next day, when the real trial was to be made, but he would not hear of such a thing. He said I was not to think that he minded a trifle like that. I might trust to its being all right, and it was all right. From that day I heard nothing but praise of the new apparatus, and it was used until the Fram was out in the open sea again. Thursday, September 6th. 81 degrees, 13.7 north latitude. Have I been married 5 years today? Last year this was a day of victory, when the ice fetters burst at Timor Island, but there is no thought of victory now. We are not so far north as I had expected. The northwest wind has come again, and we are drifting south. And yet the future does not seem to me so long and so dark as it sometimes has done. Next September 6th? Can it be possible that then every fetter will have burst, and we shall be sitting together talking of this time in the far north, and of all the longing, as of something that once was and that will never be again? The long, long night is past. The morning is just breaking, and a glorious new day lies before us. And what is there against this happening next year? Why should not this winter carry the Fram west to some place north of Franz Josef Land? And then my time has come, and off I go with dogs and sledges to the north. My heart beats with joy at the very thought of it. The winter shall be spent in making every preparation for that expedition, and it will pass quickly. I have already spent much time on these preparations. I think of everything that must be taken, and how it is to be arranged, and the more I look at the thing from all points of view, the more firmly convinced do I become that the attempt will be successful, if only the Fram can get north in reasonable time, not too late in the spring. If she could just reach 84 degrees or 85 degrees, then I should be off in the end of February or the first days of March, as soon as the daylight comes, after the long winter night, and the whole would go like a dance. Only 4 or 5 months, and the time for action will have come again. What joy! When I look out over the ice now, it is as if my muscles quivered with longing to be striding off over it in real earnest. Fatigue and privation will then be a delight. It may seem foolish that I should be determined to go off on this expedition, when perhaps I might do more important work quietly here on board, but the daily observations will be carried on exactly the same. I have celebrated the day by arranging my workroom for the winter. I have put in a petroleum stove, and expect that this will make it warm enough even in the coldest weather, with the snow walls that I intend to build round the outside of it, and a good roof covering of snow. At least double the amount of work will be done if this cabin can be used in winter, and I can sit up here instead of in the midst of the racket below. I have such comfortable times of it now, in peace and quietness, letting my thoughts take their way unchecked. Sunday, September 9th. 81 degrees, 4 north latitude. The midnight sun disappeared some days ago, and already the sun sets in the northwest. It is gone by 10 o'clock in the evening, and there is once more a glow over the eternal white. Winter is coming fast. Another peaceful Sunday, with rest from work and a little reading. Out snowshoeing today, I crossed several frozen-over lanes, and very slight packing has begun here and there. I was stopped at last by a broad open lane, lying pretty nearly north and south. At places it was 400 to 500 yards across, and I saw no end to it either north or south. The surface was good. One got along quickly, with no exertion at all when it was in the direction of the wind. This is undeniably a monotonous life. Sometimes it feels to me like a long dark night, my life's Ragnarok, dividing it into two. The sun is darkened, the summer's with it, all weather is weighty with woe. Snow covers the earth, the wind whistles over the endless plains, and for 3 years this winter lasts, till comes the time for the great battle, and men tramp hell's way. There is a hard struggle between life and death, but after that comes the reign of peace. The earth rises from the sea again and decks itself anew with verdure. Torrents roar, eagles hover over them watching for fish among the rocks, and then Valhalla, fairer than the sun, and long length of happy days. Pettersen, who is cook this week, came in here this evening as usual to get the bill of fare for next day. When his business was done, he stood for a minute, and then said that he had had such a strange dream last night. He had wanted to be taken as cook with a new expedition, but Dr. Nansen wouldn't have him. And why not? Well, this was how it was. I dreamed that Dr. Nansen was going off across the ice to the Pole with 4 men, and I asked to be taken. But you said that you didn't need a cook on this expedition, and I thought that was queer enough, for you would surely want food on this trip as well. It seemed to me that you had ordered the ship to meet you at some other place. Anyhow, you were not coming back here, but to some other land. It's strange that one can lie and rake up such a lot of nonsense in one's sleep. That was perhaps not such very great nonsense, Pettersen. It is quite possible that we might have to make such an expedition, but if we did, we should certainly not come back to the Fram. Well, if that happened, I would ask to go, sure enough, for it's just what I should like. I'm no great snowshoer, but I would manage to keep up somehow. That's all very well, but there's a great deal of weary hard work on a journey like that. You needn't think it's all pleasure. No, no one would expect that, but it would be all right if I might only go. But there might be worse than hardships, Pettersen. It would more than likely mean risking your life. I don't care for that either. A man has got to die sometime. Yes, but you don't want to shorten your life? Oh, I would take my chance of that. You can lose your life at home, too, though perhaps not quite so easily as here. But if a man was always to be thinking about that, he would never do anything. That's true. Anyhow, he would not need to come on an expedition like this. But remember that a journey northward over the ice would be no child's play. No, I know that well enough. But if it was with you, I shouldn't be afraid. It would never do if we had to manage alone. We'd be sure to go wrong, but it's quite a different thing, you see, when there is one to lead that you know has been through it all before. It is extraordinary, the blind faith such men have in their leader. I believe they would set off without a moment's reflection if they were asked to join in an expedition to the Pole now, with black winter at the door. It is grand as long as the faith lasts, but God be merciful to him on the day that it fails. Saturday, September 15th. This evening we have seen the moon again for the first time. Beautiful full moon, and a few stars were also visible in the night sky, which is still quite light. Notices were posted up today in several places. They ran as follows. As fire here on board might be followed by the most terrible consequences, too great precaution cannot be taken. For this reason, every man is requested to observe the following rules most conscientiously. 1. No one is to carry matches. 2. The only places where matches may be kept are 1. The galley, where the cook for the time being is responsible for them. 2. The 4 single cabins, where the inmate of each is responsible for his box. 3. The work cabin, when work is going on. 4. On the mast in the saloon, from which neither box nor single matches must be taken away under any circumstances. 3. Matches must not be struck anywhere except in the places above named. 4. The one exception to the above rules is made when the forge has to be lighted. 5. All the ship's holds are to be inspected every evening at 8 o'clock by the fire inspector, who will give in his report to the undersigned. After that time no one may, without special permission, take a light into the holds or into the engine room. 6. Smoking is only allowed in the living rooms and on deck. Lighted pipes or cigars must on no account be seen elsewhere. Fridtjof Nansen, from September 15th, 1894. Some of these regulations may seem to infringe on the principle of equality which I have been so anxious to maintain, but these seem to me the best arrangements I can make to ensure the good of all, and that must come before everything else. Friday, September 21st. We have had tremendously strong wind from the northwest and north for some days, with a velocity at times of 39 and 42 feet. During this time we must have drifted a good way south. The radical right had got hold of the helm, said Amundsen, but their time in power was short, for it fell calm yesterday, and now we are going north again, and it looks as if the left were to have a spell at the helm to repair the wrongs done by the right. Kennels for the dogs have been built this week, a row of splendid ice houses along the port side of the ship, 4 dogs in each house, good warm winter quarters. In the meantime our 8 little pups are thriving on board. They have a grand world to wander round, the whole foredeck with an awning over it. You can hear their little barks and yelps as they rush about among shavings, hand sledges, the steam winch, mill axle, and other odds and ends. They play a little, and they fight a little, and forward under the forecastle they have their bed among the shavings, a very cosy corner, where Kvik lies stretched out like a lioness in all her majesty. There they tumble over each other in a heap round her, sleep, yawn, eat, and pull each other's tails. It is a picture of home and peace here near the pole, which one could watch by the hour. Life goes its regular, even, uneventful way, quiet as the ice itself, and yet it is wonderful how quickly the time passes. The equinox has come, the nights are beginning to turn dark, and at noon the sun is only 9 degrees above the horizon. I pass the day busily here in the work cabin, and often feel as if I were sitting in my study at home, with all the comforts of civilization round me. If it were not for the separation, one could be as well off here as there. Sometimes I forget where I am. Not infrequently in the evening, when I have been sitting absorbed in work, I have jumped up to listen when the dogs barked, thinking to myself, who can be coming? Then I remember that I am not at home, but drifting out in the middle of the frozen polar sea at the commencement of the second long Arctic night. The temperature has been down to 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, minus 17 degrees Celsius today. Winter is coming on fast. There is little drift just now, and yet we are in good spirits. It was the same last autumn equinox, but how many disappointments we have had since then! How terrible it was in the later autumn, when every calculation seemed to fail as we drifted farther and farther south. Not one bright spot on our horizon. But such a time will never come again. There may still be great relapses, there may be slow progress for a time, but there is no doubt as to the future. We see it dawning, bright in the west, beyond the Arctic night. Sunday, September 23rd. It was a year yesterday since we made fast for the first time to the great hummock in the ice. Hansen improved the occasion by making a chart of our drift for the year. It does not look so very bad, though the distance is not great. The direction is almost exactly what I had expected. But more of this tomorrow. It is so late that I cannot write about it now. The nights are turning darker and darker. Winter is settling down upon us. Tuesday, September 25th. I have been looking more carefully at the calculation of our last year's drift. If we reckon from the place where we were shut in on the 22nd of September last year to our position on the 22nd of September this year, the distance we have drifted is 189 miles, equal to 3 degrees 9 minutes latitude. Reckoning from the same place, but to the farthest north point we reached in summer, July 16th, makes the drift 225 miles, or 3 degrees 46 minutes. But if we reckon from our most southern point in the autumn of last year, November 7th, to our most northern point this summer, then the drift is 305 miles, or 5 degrees 5 minutes. We got fully 4 degrees north, from 77 degrees 43 minutes to 81 degrees 53 minutes. To give the course of the drift is a difficult task in these latitudes, as there is a perceptible deviation of the compass with every degree of longitude as one passes east or west. The change of course given in degrees will be almost exactly the same as the number of degrees of longitude that have been passed. Our average course will be about north 36 degrees west. The direction of our drift is consequently a much more northerly one than the Jeannette's was, and this is just what we expected. Ours cuts hers at an angle of 59 degrees. The line of this year's drift continued will cut the northeast island of Spitzbergen and take us as far north as 84 degrees 7 minutes in 75 degrees east longitude, somewhere north-northeast of Franz Josef Land. The distance by this course to the northeast island is 827 miles. Should we continue to progress only at the rate of 189 miles a year, it would take us 4.4 years to do this distance. But assuming our progress to be at the rate of 305 miles a year, we shall do it in 2.7 years. That we should drift at least as quickly as this seems probable, because we can hardly now be driven back as we were in October last year, when we had the open water to the south and the great mass of ice to the north of us. The past summer seems to me to have proved that while the ice is very unwilling to go back south, it is most ready to go northwest as soon as there is ever so little easterly, not to mention southerly wind. I therefore believe, as I always have believed, that the drift will become faster as we get farther northwest, and the probability is that the Fram will reach Norway in 2 years, the expedition having lasted its full 3 years, as I somehow had a feeling that it would. As our drift is 59 degrees more northerly than the Jeannette's, and as Franz Josef Land must force the ice north, taking for granted that all that comes from this great basin goes round to the north of Franz Josef Land, it is probable that our course will become more northerly the farther on we go, until we are past Franz Josef Land, and that we shall consequently reach a higher latitude than our drift so far would indicate. I hope 85 degrees at least. Everything has come right so far. The direction of our drift is exactly parallel with the course which I conjectured to have been taken by the floe with the Jeannette relics, and which I pricked out on the chart prepared for my London address. This course touched about 87½ degrees north latitude. I have no right to expect a more northerly drift than parallel to this, and have no right to be anything but happy if I get as far. Our aim, as I have so often tried to make clear, is not so much to reach the point in which the earth's axis terminates, as to traverse and explore the unknown polar sea. And yet I should like to get to the pole too, and hope that it will be possible to do so, if only we can reach 84 degrees or 85 degrees by March, and why should we not? Thursday, September 27th. Have determined that beginning from tomorrow every man is to go out snowshoeing 2 hours daily from 11 to 1, so long as the daylight lasts. It is necessary. If anything happened that obliged us to make our way home over the ice, I am afraid some of the company would be a terrible hindrance to us, unpractised as they are now. Several of them are first-rate snowshoers, but 5 or 6 of them would soon be feeling the pleasures of learning. If they had to go out on a long course, and without snowshoes, it would be all over with us. After this we used to go out regularly in a body. Besides being good exercise, it was also a great pleasure, Everyone seemed to thrive on it, and they all became accustomed to the use of the shoes on this ground, even though they often got them broken in the unevenness of the pressure ridges. We just patched and riveted them together to break them again. Monday, October 1st. We tried a hand sledge today with a load of 250 pounds. It went along easily, and yet was hard to draw, because the snowshoes were apt to slip to the side on the sort of surface we had. I almost believe that Indian snowshoes would be better on this ground, where there are so many knobs and smooth hillocks to draw the sledges over. When Amundsen first began to pull the sledge, he thought it was nothing at all, but when he had gone on for a time he fell into a fit of deep and evidently sad thought, and went silently home. When he got on board, he confided to the others that if a man had to draw a load like that, he might just as well lie down at once. It would come to the same thing in the end. That is how practice is apt to go. In the afternoon I yoked 3 dogs to the same little sledge with the 250 pounds load, and they drew it along as if it were nothing at all. Tuesday, October 2nd. Beautiful weather, but coldish. 49 degrees Fahrenheit of frost, minus 27 degrees Celsius during the night, which is a good deal for October, surely. It will be a cold winter if it goes on at the same rate, but what do we care whether there are 90 degrees of frost or 120 degrees? A good snowshoeing excursion today. They are all becoming most expert now, but darkness will be on us presently, and then there will be no more of it. It is a pity. This exercise is so good for us. We must think of something to take its place. I have a feeling now as if this were to be my last winter on board. Will it really come to my going off north in spring? The experiment in drawing a loaded hand sledge over this ice was certainly anything but promising, and if the dogs should not hold out, or should be of less use than we expect, and if we should come to worse ice instead of better, well, we should only have ourselves to trust to. But if we can just get so far on with the Fram that the distance left to be covered is at all a reasonable one, I believe that it is my duty to make the venture, and I cannot imagine any difficulty that will not be overcome when our choice lies between death and onward and home. Thursday, October 4th. The ice is rather impassable in places, but there are particular lanes or tracts. Taking it altogether, it is in good condition for sledging and snowshoeing, though the surface is rather soft, so that the dogs sink in a little. This is probably chiefly owing to there having been no strong winds of late, so that the snow has not been well packed together. Life goes on in the regular routine. There is always some little piece of work turning up to be done. Yesterday the breaking in of the young dogs began. It was just the 3, Barbara, Freya, and Susina. Gullibrand is such a miserable thin wretch that he is escaping for the present. They were unmanageable at first, and rushed about in all directions, but in a little while they drew like old dogs, and were altogether better than we expected. Gvik, of course, set them a noble example. It fell to Mogstad's lot to begin the training, as it was his week for looking after the dogs. This duty is taken in turns now. Each man has his week of attending to them both morning and afternoon. It seems to me that a very satisfactory state of feeling prevails on board at present, when we are just entering on our second Arctic night, which we hope is to be a longer, and probably also a colder one, than any people before us have experienced. There is appreciably less light every day. Soon there will be none, but the good spirits do not wane with the light. It seems to me that we are more uniformly cheerful than we have ever been. What the reason of this is I cannot tell, perhaps just custom, but certainly, too, we are well off, in clover, as the saying is. We are drifting gently, but it is to be hoped surely, on through the dark unknown Nebelheim, where terrified fancy has pictured all possible horrors. Yet we are living a life of luxury and plenty, surrounded by all the comforts of civilization. I think we shall be better off this winter than last. The firing apparatus in the galley is working splendidly, and the cook himself is now of opinion that it is an invention which approaches perfection. So we shall burn nothing but coal oil there now. It warms the place well, and a good deal of the heat comes up here into the workroom, where I sometimes sit and perspire until I have to take off one garment after another, although the window is open and there are 30-odd degrees of cold outside. I have calculated that the petroleum which this enables us to keep for lighting purposes only will last at least 10 years, though we burn it freely 300 days in the year. At present we are not using petroleum lamps at the rate assumed in my calculation, because we frequently have electric light. And then even here summer comes once a year, or at any rate something which we must call summer. Even allowing for accidents, such as the possibility of a tank springing a leak and the oil running out, there is still no reason whatever for being sparing of light, and every man can have as much as he wants. What this means can best be appreciated by one who, for a whole year, has felt the stings of conscience every time he went to work or read alone in his cabin and burned a lamp that was not absolutely necessary, because he could have used the general one in the saloon. As yet the coals are not being touched, except for the stove in the saloon, where they are to be allowed to burn as much as they like this winter. The quantity thus consumed will be a trifle in comparison with our store of about 100 tons, for which we cannot well have any other use until the Fram once more forces her way out of the ice on the other side. Another thing that is of no little help in keeping us warm and comfortable is the awning that is now stretched over the ship. The only part I have left open is the stern, abaft the bridge, so as to be able to see round over the ice from there. Personally, I must say that things are going well with me, much better than I could have expected. Time is a good teacher. That devouring longing does not gnaw so hard as it did. Is it apathy beginning? Shall I feel nothing at all by the time 10 years have passed? Oh, sometimes it comes on with all its old strength, as if it would tear me in pieces. But this is a splendid school of patience. Much good it does to sit wondering whether they are alive or dead at home. It only almost drives one mad. All the same, I never grow quite reconciled to this life. It is really neither life nor death, but a state between the two. It means never being at rest about anything or in any place, a constant waiting for what is coming, a waiting in which perhaps the best years of one's manhood will pass. It is like what a young boy sometimes feels when he goes on his first voyage. The life on board is hateful to him. He suffers cruelly from all the torments of seasickness, and being shut in within the narrow walls of the ship is worse than prison. But it is something that has to be gone through. Beyond it all lies the south, the land of his youthful dreams, tempting with its sunny smile. In time he arises, half dead. Does he find his south? How often it is but a barren desert he is cast ashore on. Sunday, October 7th. It has cleared up this evening, and there is a starry sky and aurora borealis. It is a little change from the constant cloudy weather with frequent snow showers which we have had these last days. Thoughts come and thoughts go. I cannot forget, and I cannot sleep. Everything is still. All are asleep. I only hear the quiet step of the watch on deck, the wind rustling in the rigging and the canvas, and the clock gently hacking the time in pieces there on the wall. If I go on deck, there is black night, stars sparkling high overhead, and faint aurora flickering across the gloomy vault, and out in the darkness I can see the glimmer of the great monotonous plain of the ice. It is all so inexpressibly forlorn, so far, far removed from the noise and unrest of men and all their striving. What is life thus isolated? A strange, aimless process, and man a machine which eats, sleeps, awakes, eats and sleeps again, dreams, but never lives. Or is life really nothing else? And is it just one more phase of the eternal martyrdom, A new mistake of the erring human soul, this banishing of one's self to the hopeless wilderness, only to long there for what one has left behind? Am I a coward? Am I afraid of death? Oh, no! But in these nights such longing can come over one for all beauty, for that which is contained in a single word, and the soul flees from this interminable and rigid world of ice. When one thinks how short life is, and that one came away from it all of one's own free will, and remembers, too, that another is suffering the pain of constant anxiety, true, true, till death. O mankind, thy ways are passing strange. We are but as flakes of foam, helplessly driven over the tossing sea. Wednesday, October 10th. Exactly 33 years old, then. There is nothing to be said to that, except that life is moving on and will never turn back. They have all been touchingly nice to me today, and we have held fete. They surprised me in the morning by having the saloon ornamented with flags. They had hung the Union above Sverdrup's place. We accused Amundsen of having done this, but he would not confess to it. Above my door, and over Hansen's, they had the pennant with Fram in big letters. It looked most festive when I came into the saloon, and they all stood up and wished me many happy returns. When I went on deck, the flag was waving from the mizzen masthead. We took a snowshoeing excursion south in the morning. It was windy, bitter weather. I have not felt so cold for long. The thermometer is down to 24 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, minus 31 degrees Celsius this evening. This is certainly the coldest birthday I have had yet. A sumptuous dinner. 1. Fish pudding. 2. Sausages and tongue with potatoes, haricot beans, and peas. 3. Preserved strawberries with rice and cream. Crown extract of malt. Then, to everyone's surprise, our doctor began to take out of the pocket of the overcoat he always wears remarkable-looking little glasses, medicine glasses, measuring glasses, test glasses, one for each man, and lastly, a whole bottle of Lisholmer liqueur, real native Lisholmer, which awakened general enthusiasm. 2 drachms of that per man was not so bad, besides a quarter of a bottle of extract of malt. Coffee after dinner, with a surprise in the shape of apple cake baked by our excellent cook Petterson, formerly smith and engineer. Then I had to produce my cigars, which were also much enjoyed, and of course we kept holiday all the afternoon. At supper there was another surprise, a large birthday cake from the same baker with the inscription TLMD, Tillykke med dagen, the Norwegian equivalent for wishing a happy birthday, 10/10/94. In the evening came pineapples, figs, and sweets. Many a worse birthday might be spent in lower altitudes than 81 degrees. The evening is passing with all kinds of merriment, every one is in good spirits, the saloon resounds with laughter. How many a merry meeting it has been the scene of! But when one has said good night and sits here alone, sadness comes, and if one goes on deck, there are the stars high overhead in the clear sky. In the south is a smoldering aurora arch, which from time to time sends up streamers, a constant restless flickering. We have been talking a little about this expedition, Sverdrup and I. When we were out on the ice in the afternoon, he suddenly said, "Yes, next October you will, perhaps, not be on board the Fram." To which I had to answer that unless the winter turned out badly, I probably should not. But still I cannot believe in this rightly myself. Every night I am at home in my dreams, but when the morning breaks, I must again, like Helga, gallop back on the pale horse by the way of the reddening dawn, not to the joys of Valhalla, but to the realm of eternal ice. For thee alone, Sigrun, of the Sava mountain, must Helga swim in the dew of sorrow. End of File 17.